Hello and welcome back to another video. Now we're about coming up towards the first end of the first quarter of the year. So I thought what I would do is I would let you know 3 books that I've read so far this year that I'm pretty sure are going to feature in my top 10 list at the end of the year. These 3 books so far have really impressed me, blown me away even, maybe you might say that. And they're 3 books that I think, as I said, are still going to be there when it comes to the end of the year. I can't see there being 7 or 8 more books better than this towards the end of the year. So stay tuned, here you are, here are the 3 books that I think have been the best books I've read so far this year. The first book is The Whalebone Theatre by Joanna Quinn. This I read in January. It was my first book which was chosen by followers. So what I did at the start of the year is I said, okay, name 1 book you definitely think I should be reading throughout 2024. I picked the 12 most popular and then I went ahead and picked those 12, stuck them into each month and then essentially assigned them to a month based on when I need to pre-order, if I already had the book, etc. So Whalebone Theatre was the one I chose in January. It turns out to be an utterly fantastic book, and as I said, preceding all of this, possibly one of my favourite books of the year towards the end of the year, already one of my favourite books this year, or the start of the year even. Can I speak today? No. So The Whalebone Theatre is essentially about a group of kids, specifically one young girl who is called, doesn't tell me, but she's a young girl. She grows up in a kind of a rich family. She gets a new mum at the start of the book, and she goes off and uses her imagination to try and fill in the gaps and fill in her time, because essentially she's not being that well looked after by her parents. Her dad goes off in business a lot, her stepmom's not that interested in her because she's not her child. So basically she ends up going off and creating her own imagination. She has her own time outside of things. What happens in the preceding years, or the following years even, she gets siblings from the stepmother and the parent, and these siblings then join her in these imagination games. And the reason it's called the Whalebone Theatre is because one day they stumble across a whale carcass, which is sick. Imagine stumbling across a whale carcass. Now, there's technicalities that mean that the king at the time owns it, but luckily they managed to use it and turn it into a theatre, and they used this skeleton to use as a theatre. I can't speak today, I do apologise. But essentially then what happens is they create lots of theatre and they do lots of fun things in the Whalebone Theatre. However, what's more interesting is it then picks up with them 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, when they are adults, when they've grown up, when they're going through real life problems. The brother, for example, is in the war. He's not technically on the front line, but he's part of the war. The other 2 sisters are doing other things across the world as well and finding themselves in a world that at the time is in a lot of turmoil. Now, this is a book that will both impress you, considering I believe it's Joanna Quinn's debut novel. She's put some things in here, such as newsletters and things. Let me see if I can find an example of something. So yeah, for example, here you've got like a little diary entry, which is just an interesting way. If this is my first book, I'm just going to write a novel and see how that goes. But the bravery for her to write a novel that includes, as I said, diary entries, and there's like letters to other people, and there's a poster in here and all that sort of stuff. For her to think, okay, let's throw these things in, is really brave, and I was really came out impressed. The story and the characters themselves are both fantastic. The characters are really endearing, they're really heartwarming, they're kind people, the 3 children. There's some less kind people, and that kind of shows the maturity again of Joanna Quinn's writing, that she was able to write in characters that necessarily weren't perfect. They weren't these brilliant characters. There are not villains, as it were, because it's not that sort of book, but there are people who are morally wrong and maybe not the sort of people that you'd like to be hanging out with. That's essentially what the Whalebone Theatre is about. It's about them lives growing up. People die, people live, it gets sad at points, it's very sad at points, but anyway, either way, it was a brilliant read for me. If you keep seeing me look off camera, it's because I'm looking at my cat. She looks really cute right now. That was my first book that I think is definitely going to appear in this top 10 list that I keep talking about at the end of the year. So that's in December. So if you're still around in December, this book should be in there. Hold me accountable to it. If you are now listening to this beyond December 2024, watching this even, comment, does it end up in my list at the end of the year? The next book that features on this list is The List of Suspicious Things. List. Did that in my last video where I talked about it as well. This is a fantastic book. Again, another debut novel by Jenny Godfrey this time. Jenny, like everything aside, is lovely on social media. She follows me on social, I follow her. She's really humble, she's been overwhelmed by a lot that's going on. I think she's just had like TV and film rights to this and all sorts of stuff going on. So imagine your life being, oh, I just want to write a book whilst doing other things, and then all of a sudden it's all flipped upside down by this utterly fantastic book. The list of suspicious things covers essentially a young girl's story called Miv. It's set in 1979, and she is a young girl who has friends in Yorkshire during the time of the Yorkshire Ripper. She wants to write a list to try and find out who the Yorkshire Ripper is. Now, obviously, she's too young to really find it out, but what's really interesting is using these lists. So she lists down people and essentially why she thinks they could be the Yorkshire Ripper, and she lists down place and why they might be the places that the Yorkshire Ripper hangs out or kills people. What she ends up doing instead of finding the Yorkshire Ripper is she ends up finding out some other things about adults and other people in her town that aren't necessarily very nice things to find out about those people, and I think it causes her to mature. There's very much a coming of age kind of story in here. We've got Miv and her best friend, but then her best friend kind of gets involved with a boy, and that changes their relationship and their dynamic. This list starts to overtake Miv because she starts to get involved in these characters and worry about people in the town that she's like a big fan of and friends with, that they're getting manipulated. And it's almost a story where a child is forced to grow up due to this list that she kind of keeps, or these multiple lists that she keeps picking up on. And it's a really, really interesting book. Now, I was enjoying it like 70 pages in, 80 pages in. I was thinking this is really, really fun. Doesn't seem that kind of dark, that sounded bad. There are hints to darker tones and darker themes, but in general, I thought, no, this is going well, this is fine. And then there's a moment in it where I thought, oh my God, as if Jenny has just done that. And it is shocking, and it is really, really sad. And it does flip the whole book like on its head. So it kind of shot it from a 4-star to a 5-star for me. Really, really interesting decision by Jenny Godfrey to do that. The pacing is fantastic in the book. Not a vast amount happens. You're not going to be plot point after plot point, but the characters and the story that you read is really grounded. It's really interesting. I think Jenny herself has said that it reminds her of kind of her childhood, and other people I've spoken to or have seen me kind of read it say, yes, I was around when that was happening. It reminds me of that. I think one of the most famous things at the time was how women were treated. I think there was kind of an understanding that women were getting more equality and becoming more equal to men in society's means, of course. And unfortunately, what the Yorkshire Ripper did is, because he was attacking women, is they brought in some kind of underlying issues and these subconscious bias by people saying, well, maybe women shouldn't dress so provocatively, women shouldn't be out after 8 p.m, women should be accompanied by a man, and all these kind of dark things that are 70 years prior would have been a topic of conversation. But in the late 1970s, early 80s, it was very much taboo to be saying that again. That's kind of covered in here as well, especially the kind of being the woman, especially young girl. He wasn't quite attacking people of Miv's age, but it's still that kind of element, and she has conversations about it. But it's a really, really interesting story, an interesting look into the Yorkshire Ripper story. So if that's something you're interested in, not in a weird way, just in a, oh, that's an interesting topic, I'll read about that. That's in here. Probably a fairly realistic understanding of what it would have been like for someone like that living around that area at that time, in that age. Anyway, great book. Also another fantastic cover. The Where We're in Theatres front cover was stunning as well. This is another brilliant cover. I like these sort of books as well, because this is proper paper, like cardboard. Don't even quite hear it, but that kind of soft touch, matte cardboard feeling, lovely. And a very floppy book as well, which always helps. That's the list of suspicious things by Jenny Godfrey, and that's the second book of 3 on this list of books I think are going to feature in my top 10 list at the end of the year. Boom. Then the final book on this list is One Day by David Nicholls. Now this, I would say, currently stands as my favourite book of the year. A lot of people have read it before me. Nearly everyone I speak to about it said, oh yeah, I remember reading that, I remember loving it years ago when it came out. Before I was probably a big reader like I am now, where I'm reading all the time, listening to an audiobook all the time. Before I was doing any of that, I think people were reading One Day. I picked it up because of the TV series popped up on Netflix. Everybody started talking about it. To be specific, my partner literally put it on in front of me, and then it read a line based on the book by David Nicholls, and she was like, have you read this? And I was like, no. So I stuck my headphones in, concentrated on something else, and instantly bought this on Amazon, and then started reading it, and then caught up on the TV series, and it became this massive phenomenon. It's incredibly sad. It's an incredibly powerful story about genuine love, genuine romance. I have a big problem with romance books in that they're not romance. They're often just two people that you know are going to end up together, and they do, and their problems aren't that hard. One of them's often not got much personality, often the male's not got a lot of personality. So to read a romance book where it genuinely is romantic in how things aren't always candles, dinner, sometimes people are suffering through really dark times and people are there for them despite the fact they've treated them poorly, these sort of elements. It covers a story specifically of Emma and Dexter, M and Dex, or Dex and M, as they call themselves in the book. Starts in the year 1988 when they first graduate. They meet at graduation together, and it takes you through about 2 decades. Are we talking 90s? Yeah, just under 2 decades, where they spend the rest of their lives doing things separately, but essentially coming together every now and then to have a catch up, to see how they're doing, see where they're each at. Dexter has this career that is considered successful, but maybe isn't as great as it seems. Emma has this career that seems maybe not as successful, but this is a little bit more grounded, and both of them have their problems, and every time a problem arises, they think of the other and think, would it have been different if I was with them? I don't want to spoil anything of this book because there are some really big moments. There's a bit that will break your heart, a bit that really did make me have to stop reading for a second because I was like, holy crap, I want to come back. Now I'm hyped, I want to come back to this later. It's the bit that everybody starts crying about in the TV series as well. And it's shocking and it's really powerful of David Nicholls to do something like that. Again, don't want to spoil why it's powerful, but if you think you can't cry, if you think you're not that emotive, try and read one day and then come back to me and say, yeah, I don't really care. There are 2 people I think I've told that I've read this on social media and they've gone, couldn't deal with it, didn't like it. And I think that's probably because the whole idea of a grounded relationship, there's no major plot points, there's no explosions, there's no unbelievable cliffhangers. There's just a story of 2 genuine, down-to-earth British people who are from very different backgrounds, constantly coming back together and having these just grounded, realistic conversations that people in their 20s and 30s have. And I think sometimes people don't want to read that because it either reminds themselves or isn't something that's particularly interesting to read about in a separate idea. However, I enjoyed it because it did make me think of real life. It did make me think, okay, these are actually people I can relate to. Going to the park, your career maybe being successful, but you not being as happy in the background, not me specifically, but they're things that genuinely happen. In a lot of romance books, unfortunately, they're often too perfect. You don't hear about their career, you don't hear about their home life, it's just their interaction with each other and this forced chemistry. There's no forced chemistry in here, and I think that's a lot better. Anyway, gonna stop talking about One Day now because it's just utterly brilliant. I think I did a video recently about how it's the best romance book I've ever read because probably there's no romance in it. It's just romance in the true sense of the word. You get to the end of your life, you think that was romantic. This book is what love is all about. One Day by David Nicholls. I'll stop talking now and I'll show you all 3 books lined up. So those are the 3 books that I've read that I think are going to feature in my top 10 list. These are 3 best books I've read so far. Which way is the best way of holding them? Like this? Yes, those back to front to me, but it'll be fine to you. So you've got The Whalebone Theatre. Is it upside down? No. The Whalebone Theatre by Joanne Quinn. You've got The List of Suspicious Things, which was upside down, by Jenny Godfrey. They're all upside down. And One Day by David Nicholls. 3 utterly fantastic books that I think you should definitely have a read of. Universally, everybody that's kind of read these, other than One Day, because it's had a few more readers, so you get the negative people. Universally, these are all very, very positively received, and I would highly, highly recommend you picking up all 3 of these. If you're looking for a new book to read, you've got a book here which covers decades, covers a fantastic story of siblings, their journey, their imagination, how parenthood's not always that perfect, how they kind of use their love for each other as siblings to build a life, to learn how to be kind, to replace that kind of existence of a poor parental structure. The List of Suspicious Things by Jenny Godfrey, a fantastic historical fiction that takes you through the story of a childhood, which is sometimes quite hard to write about, especially if you're somebody who's in their 20s, 30s writing about it. I don't know if it ever really says how old Miv is, but I'd imagine she's like around 10 to 13 years old, and it's really, really interesting. If Yorkshire the Ripper is kind of a thing that you're into, then that's an interesting read as well. And there's a heartbreaking moment. Talking of heartbreaking moments, One Day by David Nicholls, one of the greatest love stories that I've ever read. Heartbreaking, heartwarming, utterly fantastic. 2 of the greatest characters I think that I've ever read in any sort of kind of love story. 2 people I genuinely wanted to get together. Very, very hard for me to say in any book really, because I don't care. I just want story and I just want people to make me laugh. I just want great adventures. But these 2 are fantastic. My cat's down here looking at me, so I think I need to go feed him. See you in the next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Bye.